When we think of Scotland, certain images almost automatically come to mind. Mist-covered valleys, dark and silent lochs, Nessie, isolated castles battered by the wind. This vision of the country has been shaped through history, but also through cinema. Films like Braveheart or Highlander have anchored the idea of a Scotland made of clans, battles, and wild territories. And the reality is not far from the myth. Scotland is home to more than 30,000 lochs and over 2,000 castles scattered across its landscapes. For this new series, we decided to show you Scotland through 5 movies. The wide landscapes of the Highlands, the West Coast, the Isle of Skye, Glasgow, and Edinburgh. Welcome to Scotland. Scotland occupies the northern third of the island of Great Britain. Since the Act of Union of 1707, it has been part of the same British state, yet it has retained its own parliament, its own legal system, and its own culture. A nation in its own right, within the same state. Just over 5 million people live here, spread across a land of vast open spaces. The country naturally divides into 2 parts. In the south, the lowlands, where the major cities are concentrated, Glasgow and Edinburgh. In the north, the highlands, where the landscape shifts, more rugged, more open, more silent. Our point of entry, Edinburgh Airport, in the heart of the lowlands. We land in the late morning. Bags collected, car picked up. We take the road. In Scotland, the road is part of the journey, but distances can be misleading. The roads are lots of time narrow, winding, and the landscapes constantly demand your attention. Here, even a short distance can take far longer than expected. First stop, Falkirk. Along the Forth and Clyde Canal stand the Kelpies, 2 immense steel horse heads, 30 meters high. They pay tribute to the Clydesdale horses that once pulled barges along this canal, the industrial heart of 19th century Scotland. But their name comes from elsewhere. In Scottish legends, Kelpies are water spirits. Creatures able to take the shape of horses to lure travelers to their doom. Industry and myth, the 2 faces of the country, already meeting here just a few kilometers from Edinburgh. We set off again. The cold steel of the Kelpies fading in the rear view mirror. Next stop, Stirling. Arriving, we sit down for a few minutes at a terrace cafe. In front of us, the town seems almost modest. Yet, behind these quiet facades, lies one of the most strategic places in Scottish history. For centuries, Stirling was the key to the country. Whoever controlled this town controlled the passage to the north. the threshold between the lowlands and the highlands. We finish our coffee and walk up towards the old town. The slope quickly makes itself felt. The streets grow narrower. The old facades seem almost to lean toward one another. Dark stone, irregular gables. Walls that appear to have stood here for centuries without really changing. It was in these surroundings that the course of Scottish history shifted. In 1297, at the Stirling Bridge, William Wallace pushed back the English army, the battle that would later inspire Braveheart. A few miles from here, at Bannockburn, Robert the Bruce secured the independence of the kingdom in 1314. But walking through these streets, history is not the first thing that strikes you. It's the atmosphere. Stone worn by wind and rain. Quiet lanes. That strange feeling that the town never truly left the Middle Ages. We continue up to the Old Town Cemetery. It stretches across the hill, just beside the Church of the Holy Rood, one of the oldest churches in Scotland still in use. It was here, in 1567, that James VI was crowned. He was only 13 months old. He would later become the first king to unite the crowns of Scotland and England. Around the church, the graves descend gently down the slope. Some stones stand straight, others lean under the weight of time. Moss slowly erases the names. Beneath our feet rest generations of Stirling, merchants, soldiers, entire families whose lives are sometimes remembered only by a date carved in stone. And in front of us, dominating everything, stands the castle, massive, perched on its rocky outcrop. For centuries, it served as one of the main residences of the Scottish kings. We simply observe it from the outside. But from the height, it becomes immediately clear why this place was so strategic. Every road seems to pass through here. As we walk back down toward the town, two statues catch the eye. Rob Roy MacGregor, the man of the clans and the mountains, and Robert Burns, the national poet, the one who gave a voice to the soul of Scotland. The pen and the sword. Stirling gathers all of this within just a few streets. A town, a passage. The place where Scotland slowly begins to change its face before giving way to the Highlands. As soon as we leave the city, the landscape begins to change. The weather changes just as quickly. In Scotland, sunshine, wind, and rain can follow one another within minutes, which is why a raincoat is mandatory when traveling through the Highlands. The hills draw closer, the roads become narrower, and the Scottish countryside opens up before us. stop, Doune Castle, a remarkably well-preserved 14th century fortress standing on the banks of the River Teith. High, massive walls that have withstood the centuries. Film and television fans may recognize it. It has served as a filming location for several productions, including Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and the series Outlander. Back on the road, another typically Scottish encounter awaits us. In the fields, the famous Highland cows appear. With their long fringe and impressive horns, these cattle have become one of the symbols of the Highlands. We stop for a few minutes, just long enough to watch them watch us. The road then runs along Loch Lubnaig, a long, narrow loch framed by wooded hills. Several small pull-offs allow travelers to stop for a moment and take in the view. The further we go, the more dramatic the landscape becomes. The A82 road leads up towards one of the most spectacular landscapes in Scotland, Glencoe. Often considered one of the most scenic drives in the country, this road winds through a landscape that feels both wild and monumental. The region is also a paradise for hikers, with countless trails crossing the mountains and valleys that surround the glen. This glacial valley, carved thousands of years ago, is now framed by dark steep mountains that rise abruptly from the valley floor. A little further along, the road passes through a wooded area where several small waterfalls cascade down the rocks beside the road. Nothing monumental, but enough to make you stop for a moment and listen to the sound of the water. Several viewpoints allow for brief stops along the way. Among them, the Three Sisters Viewpoint, one of the most famous panoramas in Scotland. The name refers to the three prominent ridges of the Bidian-Lambian Massif that stand side by side above the valley, resembling three giant sisters watching over the glen. It's a must-stop along the A82, perfect for photos with the river and the basalt cliffs in the background. But Glencoe is not only known for its landscapes. It's also the site of one of the most infamous events in Scottish history. In 1692, members of the MacDonald clan were massacred here by government troops after having offered them hospitality, a betrayal that left a deep mark on the history of the Highlands. 38 men were killed in their sleep by those who had shared their roof. A betrayal in a country where hospitality was once a sacred law. Three rocky ridges dominate the valley, their silhouettes emerging through the mist. We also pass the Rollstone Cairn area, where the road winds its way through the mountains. It quickly becomes clear why this region is so often used as a filming location. Continuing west, the landscapes grow even wilder. In total, From Stirling to our accommodation, we will have driven about 110 miles, a little over 175 kilometers. But in Scotland, distances can be deceptive. The roads are narrow, winding, and the landscapes constantly invite you to stop. Here, the road is part of the journey. By the time we reach our accommodation for the night, the day is already coming to an end. The next morning, the light slowly filters in. Outside, several rabbits cross the lawn without any hurry, indifferent, perfectly at home. There is something calming in that indifference, a world that exists without us and simply goes on. We get back on the road. But Nevis rises to 1,345 meters and is the highest mountain in Scotland, the United Kingdom, and the entire British Isles. Its summit is often hidden by clouds, frequently appearing and disappearing in the mist of the Highlands. We catch a glimpse of it without really seeing it, as if the mountain decides what it reveals and what it keeps. We do not stop for long. Shortly after the village of Invergarry, the ruins of Invergarry Castle appears on the edge of Loch Lochy. Only a few walls remain of this former stronghold of the MacDonald clan, but the place still carries a particular atmosphere. Some places do not need time to impose themselves. Further on, Loch Lochy, one of the lakes that form the Great Glen, the natural fault line that cuts across Scotland from northeast to southwest like a geological scar. The water is dark, the reflection sharp. We stop for a moment to look, then move on. And then, by the roadside, llamas. No one really knows what they are doing there. But there they are, impassive, in a landscape that never asks for them. Scotland has a way of offering this kind of surprises. We arrive in Fort Augustus, at the southern end of the Great Glen. Today, the village seems peaceful, but its name recalls another era, that of clans, rebellions, and military forts that once dotted the Highlands to keep them under control. Of the fort itself, almost nothing remains. Its stones were used to build the Benedictine Abbey in the 19th century on exactly the same spot. Military history has disappeared beneath quieter walls. Today, it's in the canal that shapes the village. The Caledonian Canal links the North Sea to the Atlantic using the locks of the Great Glen. Here, 5 successive locks allow boats to climb nearly 20 meters in elevation, a staircase of water in the center of the village. The gates open. The water rises. Boats lift in successive stages, watched by people along the banks. It's slow, precise, almost hypnotic. At last, the sun breaks through. We sit down on a terrace, a moment when the journey stops accelerating, and we do too. few kilometers to the north lies Invermoriston. We stop there to take a closer look at a single-arched stone bridge spanning the rapids of the River Moriston. Built in 1813 by Thomas Telford, the same engineer behind the canal at Fort Augustus. Below, the water accelerates between the rocks. The roar of the river echoes dully against the stone arches. At the right time of year, you can see salmon fighting their way upstream here, leaping out of the water to clear the falls. With the sound of the river still in our ears, we get back behind the wheel. A few kilometers later, the trees part to reveal a stretch of water almost black, motionless, and seemingly endless. We have reached the southern shore of Loch Ness. We may know the story, know that it all began with a hoax. Yet, faced with this dark expanse, the irrational takes over. We stare at the water, and deep down, we cannot help hoping to see a shadow break the surface. That is the true power of this myth. The loch is long, narrow, 227 meters deep. One of the largest lakes in Europe in terms of water volume. In summer, its waters remain at 9 degrees, opaque. It's precisely this opacity that fed the legend. Nessie was born in 1934 from a photograph published in the Daily Mail, a dark silhouette emerging from the water, quickly nicknamed the Sir John's photograph. It later turned out to be a complete hoax, a model made from a toy, mounted on a miniature submarine. The confession only came in 1994. But the lake doesn't need a monster to impress. All it takes is following its shores to understand why legends settled here. In Drumnadrochit, we make an unexpected stop. The Great Glen Distillery presents itself as the smallest artisan distillery in Scotland, and once you step inside, you understand why. A former shop converted into a distillery. A single still, hand-polished, standing in the room. The visit takes place in a small group. They explain how the botanicals are selected.
In our flavour baskets, because it's Inverness, is golden chanterelle mushrooms, lingonberry, which is a little red currant, okay, sugar kelp, which is a seaweed. In here is elderflower.
How each batch is macerated, distilled, bottled, and labelled right here, entirely by hand, in only a few hundred bottles.
And the liquid becomes a vapour. The vapour goes up here, down here, gently steaming and infusing all these beautiful flavours in here. Down here, into this lovely cool pipe.
It isn't whiskey that is produced here, it's gin. A gin that truly carries the character of its territory. The water comes from Loch Ness. The plants grow nearby. We live with a bottle. The kind of stop you never plan and never regret. Right next door stands the Loch Ness Centre, the official museum dedicated to the legend of Nessie. For those who want to understand the history of the myth in detail, the first mention of this fantastical creature dates back to the year 565. The research expeditions, the sonar technologies deployed, and the testimonies collected over centuries. Inverness lies at the mouth of the River Ness. It's the capital of the Highlands. It has neither the power of Edinburgh nor the industrial energy of Glasgow. But it doesn't try to compete. Here, the rhythm is different. We walk without hurry, letting the city slowly wrap around us. The castle dominates the riverbank from its rocky promontory. A massive silhouette, tinted pink, visible from almost everywhere in the center. Built in red sandstone in 1836 by architect William Byrne, it replaced a medieval fortress dating back to the 11th century, which had been destroyed several times, notably by the Jacobites in 1746. It once housed the courthouse and the prison. Now restored, it has been open to the public since late 2025 at the Inverness Castle Experience, immersive exhibitions, panoramic views, and the history of the MacDonald and Fraser clans. We continue along the River Ness. The water flows calmly, almost murmuring. Church spires punctuate the banks. For centuries, Inverness has been a spiritual and administrative center of the Highlands. Victorian architecture gave the town its shape. A bridge, shop windows, the quiet hum of a city living at its own scale. The Victorian market, built in 1870, opens beneath its glass roof like an indoor refuge. A constellation of small independent shops, with the smell of fresh bread and frying oil mingling in the air. We sit down to eat. Fish and chips. Simple, hot, crispy. Inverness doesn't try to impress. It welcomes. And sometimes that's enough. About 20 kilometers west of Inverness, a quiet village. Beauly is said to come from Old French, beaulieu, beautiful place. After only a few minutes here, it's easy to understand why. At the far end of the square, we discover the ruins of a priory. Founded in the 13th century by Vallombrosan monks, only the outer walls remain, and the nave open to the sky. Grass grows between the stones. Gothic windows frame the light like empty frames without stained glass. The wind moves freely where voices once sang. Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots in the 16th century, is said to have visited here during one of her journeys through the Highlands. Night is approaching, and we take the road towards our accommodation. Along the way, beside Loch Ness, we spot the ruins of Urquhart Castle below the road. Long before this 13th century castle, a fortification already stood on this promontory. For centuries, it changed hands, Scots, English, rival clans. In 1692, it was partially destroyed to prevent it from falling into the hands of the Jacobites. As we arrive back to our accommodation, right in front of us, a roe deer. It doesn't move at first. It looks at us, giving us just enough time to pull out our phone and film it for a brief moment. Then it disappears into the forest. Tomorrow, we leave this land to head towards an island shaped by wind, rock and water. A place many consider one of the most spectacular landscapes in Europe, the Isle of Skye. See you soon for new discoveries.